Hi, my name is David Need. This is Katie Need, my wife. This is Jackson, my son, and Brooklyn, my daughter.
We've been coming to Hope for 10 years. I just moved to Oconomowoc, and we heard about Hope from my aunt, who had actually never been to Hope before, but she read an article, I think, in the Waukesha Freeman, and she sent it to us in the mail when she knew our new address, and so we decided to check it out, and we have been here ever since.
So while we've been coming to Hope, God has had a big impact on our lives, having Hope Youth to really help us build upon the base of the church, the base of our faith, and bring our kids up in faith.
Both David and I grew up in Christian families, and the church was always something important to us, and we always went to church every Sunday morning. But it was always just kind of like a thing you check off, you know, like, oh, we went to church on Sunday morning. And since coming to Hope, it's the first church I've ever gone to that I feel comfortable inviting people to come to. It's the first church that we've ever actively gotten involved in volunteering and in small groups. It's not just a box that we check on Sunday morning. Hope has really become a really big part of our life and our family. We started volunteering in Hope Youth Group last year, and at that time Jack was in middle school, and we knew we were going to have him come to youth group, and we're like, well, if we're already going to be dropping him off on Wednesday nights, why don't we just volunteer at youth group?
I like coming to Hope Youth so I can hang out with my friends and listen to the music. Normally, for a Sunday, for a church, it's like you go to church and then that's for me, one of the only days that you gotta focus on God the whole day. But since Hope Youth Group is on a Wednesday night, you can focus on God halfway through the week too.
It's been really cool to see the growth in some of the students. So I've been with almost all the same kids from last year to this year, and it's been cool to see their faith growing.
Students really enjoy being at Hope Youth because it's a place to talk through some of their issues, the challenges they're facing at school or the challenges they're facing out in the world. Some of the kids latch on to the message and can start changing and impacting their lives now.
I think it's so important to invest in the faith of these students, middle school and high school. They're hearing God's word and they're listening to worship music and making those connections and stuff because they need that solid foundation.
Well, good morning, everyone in the room. Welcome to Hope Church. Everyone watching online, thank you so much for being here. You picked a fantastic weekend to be with us at Hope Church because today is the day when Hope Church is going to make a commitment to two big investments in God's kingdom. The first investment we are going to commit to is to invest in the next generation. You just heard from David and Katie and from Brooke and Jack how important a thriving youth ministry is for middle school and high school students so that they can develop a faith of their own that is resilient through the challenges of what kids face today and gets them ready for life after high school and following Jesus. Our problem is capacity. Now, this is the best problem that a church could possibly have. We don't have enough space for investing in middle school and high school students. And it's not just our student ministry, it's Hope Kids. We have a capacity problem in Hope Kids. So we are going to make an investment, expand our next generation wing so that we have more room to invest in the faith of the next generation because we believe that this is one of the most critical things that we can do as a church, that we can invest in the faith of the next generation. We think that that is worth everything. So that's a commitment that we're making today. And not only that, we are going to make an investment in the next location of Hope Church. We've been here in this building for 18 months, and oh my goodness, it has been a game changer. It is a blessing. Every week, I am so thankful that we have a place of our own as a church to gather. But this building was not just designed to be a place to gather. This building is a broadcast studio. It was made to continue to expand our reach and impact in God's kingdom. So our next commitment is to the next location, to create another Hope Church, to expand our footprint in another nearby southeastern Wisconsin community. Because everywhere around us, we need more churches that are committed to reaching people and serving people and blessing people who are far away from God. That's why it's a big day for Hope Church. And for many of us, today is going to be a big day in the story of your life, because at the end of our time today, I'm inviting everyone who is part of Hope Church to make a 12-month commitment to financial generosity. Now, some people have asked, is the Christmas offering part of this, or is it separate? I apologize if I wasn't clear on that in the past. Our Christmas offering is something that will still be separate. We'll have our Christmas offering at the end of this year, just like we always do. If you're new to Hope Church, the Christmas offering is where we dedicate an entire weekend to encouraging everyone to give away as much money as we can, and we give away all of it. We don't keep a dollar of it, to incredible charities and nonprofit organizations that are directly impacting people's lives in Lake Country and in Milwaukee and increasingly beyond. So we'll keep that separate this year. By the way, if you are new here, just so you know, when I'm asking everyone to make a financial commitment, that's for people who are part of this church. If you are not part of this church, we're not asking you to make a commitment to generosity here because we're not your church. But I do hope that you'll make a commitment to be generous somewhere, because generous people are just better people. Generous people make the world a better place. So if we're not your church, we don't expect you to make a commitment to be generous here. But I really hope, for the sake of the people around you and for the sake of our generation, you'll decide to go and be generous somewhere. But today, as we make our commitments to 12 months of generosity, something springs to life inside of us. Anytime in life you come to the edge of any commitment, something springs to life. And we have to struggle through the uncertainties that come through it. So today, as we prepare to make our commitments, I want to talk about an idea that we haven't talked about yet in this series around commitments. And the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that in life, commitments matter. In life, commitments matter, and here's the reason why. A commitment is the most powerful act of freedom and free will that you can make as a human being. For example, if a couple decides to go to the altar side by side and commit to a marriage covenant together, that is the most powerful declaration of freedom and free will that they can make. To which some of us say, what do you mean? If you get married, aren't you losing all your freedom? No. If you get married, you are declaring your freedom. You are saying, no matter what happens in the future, no matter how I'm feeling on a given day, I declare my deepest values. I am the one who will be by your side in sickness and in health. I am declaring that I will choose to love you. You see, to make a commitment is a powerful action of freedom and free will. You are saying, no matter what comes, this is where I plant my flag. No matter what happens, these are my values and I will not be moved. Commitments matter. And all of us have been negatively impacted by people in this world who didn't believe that their commitments mattered. It could have been your parents' marriage. It could have been a relationship you were in. It could have been a past or maybe even your present employer. It could have been a friendship. You encountered someone who made a commitment, but then they didn't believe that their commitment mattered. And as a result, you suffered the fallout. You suffered the consequences of their failure to honor their commitment. But commitments matter in life because they are a declaration of your values. They are a declaration of your freedom and free will. Now, commitments don't matter in general, but Jesus taught us that financial commitments matter in specific. One time in the Sermon on the Mount, that's what he taught in Matthew chapter 6. He said, do not store up for yourselves. Now, storing up for yourselves, that's not an impulsive thing, right? Like when you're at the store, you might make an impulsive buy. I mean, not that you would ever be walking through Home Depot and you see a Baby Yoda LED light margarita glass that you suddenly have to have. I don't know who that would happen to, but storing up something, that's a commitment. You are dedicated to this plan and to this path. Jesus says, well, don't do that. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Now, right away, we have to pause and say, wait a second. The book of Proverbs in the Hebrew Scriptures, which Jesus quoted all the time, by the way, about 25% of everything Jesus said was an allusion to or a quote of the Hebrew Scriptures. The book of Proverbs says, store up for the future. Be prepared for the future. Wise people invest and are prepared for the future. What does Jesus mean? Well, let's hear him out. He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Now, notice what Jesus is saying here. He's not saying don't store up treasures on earth because treasures on earth are bad. No. Whatever you've been given financially is a blessing from God. We can't take God's blessing and then call it bad. Jesus said, don't store up treasures on earth because treasures on earth are vulnerable. Treasures on earth are temporary. That's why you should not make this the single focus of your investment. Look at what he says by contrast. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. Jesus taught there's a kind of investing that you can do that is not vulnerable, that is never going to be at risk, that cannot be taken away, and that has an eternal horizon. Jesus is saying, if your investment horizon is only the context of this life, your horizon is too small. You are missing out on the real potential returns that you could have if you take some of your resources and you store them up. By the way, store up for whom? Store up for whom? Yourselves. You can take some of your financial resources, some of your life, and you can invest, you can store up, you can commit to storing up treasures in heaven. When we invest our lives, when we invest our financial resources in the things that matter to God, we, Jesus said, are investing for ourselves so that we can have treasures in heaven. That's why commitments matter in general, and that's why financial commitments matter in specific. But when we stand on the precipice of any kind of commitment, including a 12-month commitment to practice generosity, something springs to life inside of us. And what springs to life inside of us is uncertainty. Commitments create uncertainty. All of a sudden, the what-abouts and the what-ifs, that voice in your head starts screaming all of these bad things that could happen. What if there's a recession? What about inflation? What about job security? And if you're young and you're making a commitment to financial generosity, the voice says, well, what about buying our first house? What about paying off our student loans? What about starting a family of our own? And if you're old, the voice in your head says, but what about retirement? What about being able to retire at my age? What about financial security? What about being able to pay my medical bills until my advanced age? All these uncertainties, all these whatabouts spring to life when you stand on the precipice of commitment. Now, I want to let you in on a secret. Commitments don't actually create uncertainty. Commitments expose uncertainty. Guess what? Your future is uncertain whether or not you make any commitments with your life. You can go through life trying to avoid every commitment possible, but your future is just as uncertain as if you make a commitment. It's just that when you plant your flag, it's just that when you exercise your free will and say, these are my values, and I will walk this path because this is who I am, and this is what matters, all of a sudden, all the whatabouts and all the what-ifs explode in your awareness because commitments expose how uncertain your future actually is. Now, for those of us in the room, for those of us watching at home who are Christians, for those of us who follow Jesus, the reality of uncertainty should not bother us a bit. For a number of reasons. The first reason why, think about this, if you are a Christian, uncertainty is our spiritual heritage. It is. Think about your favorite Bible story. Do you know what's true about your favorite Bible story? There was a person who in real time was facing an incredibly uncertain environment, and in that uncertainty, they chose to trust God, and they stepped forward in faith into an uncertain future with no idea what was hanging in the balance. For example, in part 1 of this series, we looked at the life of Abraham, and God called Abraham and said, go, leave your father's household, leave your tribe, leave your country, and go to a new land. And Abraham said, where do you want me to go? And God said, you start walking, I'll tell you when you get there. And after you trust me and after you get there, Abraham, I'm going to make you into a great nation. And Abraham's like, God, I'm not even a good family. I'm 75 years old and I don't have any kids. And God said, well, I guess you're going to have to trust me. Or think of Moses. When Moses is out in the wilderness as a shepherd, he sees a burning bush, then he walks over to it and God speaks to him and says, Moses, I want you to go to Pharaoh and you are going to tell him to let my people go. And Moses says, but God, I'm not a good speaker. I stutter. And besides, I already tried to liberate your people once. Remember when I was a young man and I killed that Egyptian slave master and I hid his body in the sand, but Pharaoh found out anyway and I had to run away from my life? I tried that and I failed. How am I now going to go back to Pharaoh, to the most powerful man in the world, and tell him to let his slave labor go so his economy collapses? How's that going to work out? And God says, well, I picked you, so it's time to go. Or think of David. Long before he was King David, he was shepherd boy David, and he was too young to serve in the military. So his father sent him out to the front lines to restock supplies for his brothers who were on the front lines. And when he went out to the front lines, what he met was a giant of a man for the Philistine army who wasn't just taunting the Israelite people, he was taunting the Lord David's God. And David would not put up with that. So armed only with his slingshot, he alone took the battlefield against this giant, battle-tested veteran. And he said, you come at me with sword and spear, but I come after you in the name of the Lord my God. Or think of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel was in the land of Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree, if anyone prays to anybody besides me for the next month, he will be thrown into the den of lions. And Daniel said, all I know to do is to pray 3 times a day to the Lord my God. And 3 times a day, he opened the window of his home to Jerusalem and prayed to the Lord in spite of the king's edict. Or think of the most important weekend in all of human history. The weekend when Jesus was betrayed by Judas Iscariot with a kiss. And he was arrested by soldiers, and he was tried before the Roman authorities, and he was flogged, and he was beaten, and he was crucified, and the disciples had all run away, and they lost all hope, and when he died, he was buried in a tomb, and the stone was rolled in front of it, and then on Easter morning, when the tomb was empty, everyone thought, oh no, someone stole the body. And if we had been there that weekend, I don't know if we would have done any better with trusting what God was doing, and we might have cried out, God, have you lost control? What are you doing? And God would have answered, I'm redeeming the world. Be still. You see, when we see uncertainty, many times God is doing his most important work. That's why Christians should be incredibly comfortable with the uncertainty of the future. And not only that, we believe that history is going somewhere. You see, everything that happened in the ancient world happened so that the events of world history could line up so Jesus could arrive at Christmas. And since the day he ascended into heaven, everything in world history has been lining up so that on the last day, Jesus will return and he will bring heaven down with him, and we will, with resurrected bodies, live in the kingdom of heaven with God forever. That's how the story ends. That's the last chapter. So if we know that's where it ends, we should be totally uncomfortable with the reality of an uncertain future as we go there. You see, living life is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you know what? You can make the whole journey that way. You only need to see as far as your headlights. But when we are at the precipice of commitment, all of these uncertainties that they've been there all along, but all of a sudden they spring to life. So today, I want to look at my personal favorite example of how to move forward into an uncertain future that we find in the Bible. And we find it in the life of an incredibly important transition in leadership from Moses to Joshua. You see, Moses led the people out of Egypt. He successfully freed the people, and he led them into the wilderness to march them to the promised land, and he was the leader of the people. And while he led them, he mentored a younger man named Joshua. That was Moses' protege. And he said, Joshua, you are going to learn how to lead these people because I won't live forever, and someday you're going to lead them. So Joshua enrolled in the leadership school of Moses. Now, he happened to have a school of teaching how to lead by wandering. So Joshua would come to class and he would have his notebook ready and Moses would begin his lecture and say, okay, Joshua, here's how you lead the people by wandering. Do you see that big cloud over there, that pillar of cloud? Yeah, I see it. Well, when it gets up and moves, you get up and move. Get up and move. Okay, then what? Well, you just follow it. Follow the cloud. And then what? Well, when it stops, you stop. Stop. Now, that's how you lead by wandering. And Moses was an expert in it, and Joshua had a PhD in leadership by wandering. The problem was, when they got to the threshold of the promised land and the time of wandering was over, Moses died. And God said to Joshua, now you are going to lead into an entirely different future. Here's what happened in Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them. So God says, Joshua, you're in charge. You are going to move into the promised land after you cross this river. And Joshua's like, whoa. I've never gone into a promised land. If we want to do another few laps in the desert, I'm your man, God, but this is something different. I'm not prepared for this. Here's what God said to assure him. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Now, as God tells Joshua to be strong, to be courageous, he anchors it to something. Be careful. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave to you. See, Moses didn't just teach Joshua how to lead through a wilderness. Moses wrote down the first 5 books of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Scriptures, and God says, be careful to obey this word that I gave to Moses. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left. Here's the result: that you may be successful wherever you go. Now, God repeats himself just to be clear. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful. Not just to know, be careful to do everything written in it. Now look at this. Then you will be prosperous and successful. When? When will Joshua be prosperous? When will Joshua be successful? When he is careful to obey everything God has told him to do. Then he can be strong. Then he can be courageous. Then he can be confident. Then he can know what to do in the midst of this incredibly uncertain future. When he obeys God's calling on his life, when he obeys the commands of God, then he will be prosperous and successful. And God assures him, have I not commanded you? It's not your idea. I have commanded you. I am the Lord God. I am the creator of heaven and earth. That's why he can say, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Now, in this, we are given a gem of an insight from the life of Joshua. When life is uncertain, when the future is unknown, which, by the way, is always, and when you decide it is time to make any kind of commitment in my life, including a 12-month commitment to financial generosity, and all those uncertainties spring to life, here's what we learn from Joshua. Confidence is found in God's calling. Confidence is found. Certainty is found when we obey whatever it is that God called you to do. This is why all series long, I have not asked anyone to give a percentage. I have not asked anyone for any dollar amount. Here's what I have asked everyone at Hope Church: to go before God, to seek his will in prayer, to ask God what your level of financial generosity should be for 12 months. And then, after you've done business with God, you just decide to do whatever God's inviting you to do. You just decide to do whatever God is calling you to do, because when we retreat to do what God has invited and called and commanded us to do, that's when we don't need to see past the edge of our headlights. We know the next step to take. Confidence, strength, hope, certainty is found in an uncertain world when we decide whatever God has called me to do, that's where I'm going to plant my flag. And that's exactly what Joshua did. Look what happened. Verse 10. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan River here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. Does anybody have any questions about what we're going to do? Yes, Harold, what's your question? There's water in the Jordan River. How are we going to cross the Jordan River? I don't know, but here's what God said. God said we're going to cross the Jordan River here, so we need to get ready to do what God told us we're going to do. So go pack your provisions, Harold. Got it? Okay, good. Any other questions? Yes, what's your question? Yeah, I heard there's like giants in the land. Are there giants in the land? Listen, I don't know, but we're going to do what God's called us to do. So go pack your bags, because in 3 days we're going to cross the river. Are there any other questions? Yes, you in the back. Are we still doing like the manna in the morning? Is there going to be like bread? Or do we have to start making our own breakfast once we cross the river? I don't know. God didn't tell me that, but God did tell me that we're going to cross this river in 3 days, so go pack your bags. Are there any questions about that? Now, when you say we're going to take the land, what does that mean? Listen. I don't know. I don't have answers to your questions. The future is uncertain, but here's what I do know. God said he's going to give us the land, and he said we're going to cross the Jordan River here, and he said we're going to do it in 3 days, so I need you to go pack your bags. We are going to do what God has called us to do, and we are going to do it with remarkable efficiency, so that 3 days from now, we are going to be ready to cross this river. Are there any questions about that? No? Good. Go pack. Listen. When the future is uncertain, when you make a commitment, that voice in your head, it will what about you to death. It will how you to death. It will what if you to death. But when we retreat, but what has God invited me to do? What has God called me to do? You will find amazing clarity. You will find amazing certainty when you decide, I am simply going to do what God has called me to do. Here's what happened. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God. Now, for them, that was where God made his presence known to the people. So in their minds, that's where God is. That's where his presence is. And the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go. When will they know which way to go? When they follow the presence of the Lord. Since you have never been this way before. See, I know you've never been this way before. That's why I'm not asking you to figure it out on your own. I'm asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to obey what I have commanded you to do, because I know the way you need to go. Consecrate yourselves. That's a fancy word that means this. Dedicate your life to the Lord. Set aside your life as something that is holy, because it is God's possession and it is for an eternal purpose. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Your job is to get ready to see what God is about to do. Consecrate yourselves. That's the reason why I'm inviting everyone at Hope Church to fill out one of these commitment cards and turn it in. This is how we take our financial blessings and we consecrate them. This is how we say, God, It's not just my life that's yours, my finances are yours, and I want to store up for myself treasures in heaven. And I want to make an investment in your kingdom. This is a consecrated act. This is a sacred action. To say, God, I want you present in every part of my life. Now, as Hope's pastor, I've never asked anyone to do anything that Kathy, my wife, and I were not willing to do first. And so we did the same thing. We went before God. We asked, we figured out, we wrestled with before God, what should our generosity be for the next 12 months? And I told you guys this last week, we both work at the church. She works in Hope Kids. I'm the lead pastor. We both get our paychecks from Hope Church, and we just believed God is calling us to give back 20% of our paychecks right here for the next initiative. And I'm not going to pretend when I wrote down that number that there was not any uncertainty. Because the voice in my head said, what about your expenses? What about inflation? What about the fact that this year you're going to have 2 kids in college and 1 in high school? And absolutely, uncertainty's there. In fact, as I turn it in, the uncertainty is still there. But I'm not lacking confidence in doing it. And here's the reason why. It's not because I have some magnificent faith that nobody else has. It's because I've seen firsthand what happens when our family just decides whatever God's called us to do, we're just going to lean into that. 14 years ago, Kathy and I were at a different church, and oh my goodness, it was a healthy church, it was a growing church, it was a stable church. When all of a sudden we were invited to be part of this teeny tiny church in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. It was a tiny church with a big, ambitious vision for the future, to bless people who are far away from God. And we both felt the calling of God, the tug of God to come and be part of this small church with a big vision. So we moved here, and it was 2009, and it was the Great Recession, and the economy was in free fall. And in my first half year as Hope's pastor, I successfully grew the church by negative 25%. Man, it was not looking good. And then, here's the cherry on that Sunday. As Kathy and I were getting to know our new community, whether it's at the grocery store or kids in the school, we would meet people, and this happened more than once. People would say, oh, you're the new pastor at Hope Church? We used to go there. You know what? After you get things going, we're excited to come back then. And I'd be like, are you kidding me? We don't need you to come back then. See, then things will be going. Right now, they might not get there. We need you here now. Not that I'm bitter about any of this. We don't need you there then. We need you there now. But in all of that uncertainty, and when conversations like that would happen, there was a different voice. And it wasn't an audible voice, but almost just this, hey, Jason, if that person had never, ever been a part of this church, would you still have moved across the country to pastor this church? Absolutely. Well, how come? Because I believe it's what God was inviting me to do. Well, then, Jason, I guess you're fine then, aren't you? I guess I am. And as the church grew from there, and all of a sudden, growth created its own problems, and there were so many times where I didn't know what to do next. There, we're out of space in this venue. We need another space, and we need another space. At every obstacle, how are we going to solve this problem? I never knew what to do. And in those moments where I just have a headache because I'm stuck and there's so much uncertainty, I would have that thought again. Hey, Jason, if you had known those years ago that God would bring this church this far, and all those people's lives would be impacted by encountering God, but then you would get stuck here, would you still have come here all those years ago knowing you would get stuck here? Absolutely, I would. Well, I guess you're fine then, aren't you? Well, I guess so. See, at every time I've been uncertain about this church and where we're going next, I have found that as we lean back into what God has called us to do, I can't see any further out than the headlights. But when we say we're going to continue to bless people who are far away from God, we find our path forward, and God has been so incredibly faithful over the years. And here's when I see it. Here's when I feel it. When I look at the hundreds of kids over there in Hope Kids, when I look at the hundreds of people who are so grateful, have been impacted by Jesus, and their lives and eternities are forever different. When I come and I see our baptism events and people being baptized in Jesus' name, do you know what I think? I think to myself, what if we never left our last church? What if we never came here? What if we weren't obedient to what we knew in our bones God is calling us to do? Do you know what I think? I think God's going to do whatever he's going to do with or without me. That's what I think. But my life would be so much poorer for it. My faith would be so much poorer for it because I would have missed out on the ability to participate in what God is doing in the lives of hundreds of people in our generation. So what's God calling you to do? What's he calling you to do with your generosity? Now, I know that many of you came here today, you brought your commitment card filled out. If you didn't, there is one in the seat back pocket in front of you. I'm going to give you a moment right now to fill that out. The bottom line is whatever you put in that box, you're saying that's my commitment to financial generosity at Hope Church for the next 12 months, starting April 1st. This is just a worksheet to help you get there. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that right now. The band's going to come out. They're going to sing a song while you can have any final prayers or conversations or write down whatever you need to write down. And then I'm going to come back out and give you instructions on what to do with your commitment card. But as you fill that out, I'm going to leave you with this promise from God. Let us not become weary in doing good. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Let me pray for you. Father, we thank you for your remarkable goodness and your faithfulness. All of our lives, you have been faithful and so good to us. Today, we want to consecrate ourselves, and we want to declare that our lives are for your glory. And as we make a financial commitment to generosity in your kingdom, I ask that we will be people who are incredibly comfortable with uncertainty because we can lean into whatever you've called us to do. And if we do that, we can sleep well at night. Because you don't just have the whole world in your hands, you have me in your hands. You have each and every one of us in your hands. So we ask that we, like Joshua, will have courage and strength to trust you. Amen.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for checking out that last video. My name's James and I'm on staff here at Hope Church. If you found that content helpful, please let us know by hitting the like button. Drop some comments down below. We'd love to chat and engage with you further. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That way you get a notification every time we go live and when we post new content. We do live stream our Sunday morning services starting at 9:25 Central. We'd love to have you come and be a part of our growing online community.